What is mathematically the biggest possible single strike you could deliver in Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail? In Endwalker, Ninja won the non-limited job trophy with an incredible 213,000 damage with a critical directed Hyojoranryu, while Blue Mage demonstrated just how broken they are by beating that with an over 650,000 damage final sting, despite a 10 level disadvantage. But since Blue Mage isn't getting an update this time around, that record remains unchanged. And we ask the question, what is the biggest single strike now? And does it beat Blue Mage? Be sure to let me know in the comments which jobs you expected to see in the top 3. And now, let's first get to the rules. 1. The strike demonstrated must be possible to perform effectively anywhere, which means 10 million Aflato's miseries in Bozja don't count. This also means that echo buffs from doing old content unsynced is disqualified, and even something like the double damage boost during the final bit of P8S Phase 2 is banned too. It has to be something you can demonstrate at a random striking dummy, assuming all of the necessary participants are present. 2. The attack has to be a singular swing, 1 damage number. This effectively also disqualifies dots. 3. Obviously, the attack cannot be a limit break. And 4. We assume the attack will critical direct hit, regardless of how low the probability is, which may lead to weird gearing assumptions and also gives a disadvantage to auto-direct critting attacks. Too bad. With the rules done, the way the competition is done is that we start by making a top 10 of effective potencies for jobs. This means potencies after accounting for things like various damage multipliers, like how casters have Maim and Mend for 30% boost and tanks just innately have a hidden minus 20%. If an auto-direct critting attack has a high enough potency, we'll also attempt to account for how it scales to make sure we don't overlook a potential winner. However, it should still be noted that auto-decritting attacks have a tendency to focus more on high averages rather than peaks, so don't get too excited. Once we've found a winner, we determine how much damage the attack would do, assuming you were in full best in slot for this particular demonstration, and then we amplify this number with raid buffs to see just how much we can push it. And now, let's get to the top 10 countdown. Special mention. Samurai would have been the 11th spot, but I felt it was worth mentioning it due to it being the highest ranking job using an attack with auto-crit on it. When accounting for the damage bonus, the Devilment buff that is guaranteed to be represented, as well as the 13% Hugetsu buff on Tendo Setsugeka's base 1100 potency, we get approximately 1392 potency, which is unfortunately still 80 less than the 10th place, meaning more precision on set estimate won't change that. But I included it to let you know I tried. So now we start for real. With number 10 peaking at an already astounding 1473 potency, more than 550 more potency than last expansion's 10th place. We have Reaper with Perfectio boosted by Death's Design and Arcane Circle. A base potency of 1300 boosted by 10% and then 3%. A slight jump ahead, we have Black Mage at number 9 with a Flare Star starting at 500 potency boosted by 80% by Astral Fire 3, 30% by Maim and Mend, and 27% by Enochian, landing at a whopping 1486 potency. At number 8, we have an unexpected entry at only 1501.5 potency, with Pictomancer's Star Prism during Starry Muse's 5% bonus with, of course, Maim and Mend. Because Star Prism got nerfed from 1400 potency straight down to 1100, this burst monster simply doesn't impress as much as we'd expect in a contest of one single hit. At number 7, Bard comes in representing ranged physicals with Radiant Encore, starting at 1100 potency and then boosted by 20% by the passive trait, then 15% by Raging Strikes, 6% from Radiant Finale, and then 1% from Mage's Ballad. Note that you wouldn't normally use Radiant Finale in Mage's Ballad, but for this specific purpose, definitely. We land at an impressive 1625 potency, over 100 over the previous entry. But also introduces the first caveat to maximizing the damage of a job with good raid buffs of its own. If we went on to count raid buff boosts on top, well, Bard itself is one of the best buff providers, meaning that we'd replace that job with a mere 5% boost in the raid lineup, meaning Bard stands to peak slightly lower once more party members are included. To put it into numbers, in a team of 8 players, just trying to buff a single hit as much as possible, the combined raid buffs would add up to a 66% damage boost on top of what is being calculated for this top 10. However, for Bard, this boost would drop to around 63% instead. Now, back to the countdown. At number 6, almost entirely thanks to a higher base potency, we have Dancer with Technical Finish. Starting at 1300 potency, boosted by the passive trait once again, and just Standard Finish, we already hit 1638 potency. Naturally, Technical Finish itself applies Technical Finish, so that buff wouldn't be counted until we talk raid buffs. But an interesting, sneaky game mechanics trick that Dancer has over Bard is that another Dancer's Standard Finish would also buff this one. So, unlike Bard, Dancer is not missing out on any buffs. At a weird 5th place, we have Summoner with Enkindle Solar Bahamut Exodus, starting at a mind-boggling 1500 potency. Once boosted by Maim and Mend, yes, that applies to pets too, and Searing Light, we would pass an earth-shattering 2047.5 potency. Except, this is a pet attack, and pets scale weird. In fact, in the worst case scenario, which is a raid with full party bonus, it goes as low as 80% as effective as the summoner's own spells, which drags it down to 1638 potency. The same number as Dancer. Summoner gets the higher rank though, as it technically goes a bit higher under certain conditions. And then in 4th place, we have perhaps a job you might never have expected to see this high in a contest of a single massive blow. Red Mage with Prefulgence during Embolden. Prefulgence starts at 1200 potency and then Maim boosts it by 30%, and as of 7.4, Monification no longer gives a damage boost, which Prefulgence would have missed out on anyway by the design back then. And instead, Embolden boosts the Red Mage's damage by 10%, landing us at 1716 potency. And now, we get to the top 3, starting with the Bronze Trophy, which goes to White Mage, repeating its success one last time with Afflatus Misery. This, with just Maim and Mend, brings it from a already respectable 1400 potency to a colossal 1820, over 200 more than the Endwalker version. And for the Silver Trophy, or is it even silver, we have Monk with Phantom Six-Sided Star actually. Yes, indeed, while Phantom Rush has been buffed to a ludicrous base potency of 1500, Six-Sided Star gained a new property with Dawntrail that allows it to spend Chakra for 80 potency a pop, and with Brotherhood, this can stack up to 10, so with its base potency of 780, this jumps past Phantom Rush up to 1580. Then we add in Riddler Fire's 15% and Brotherhood's 5% buffs, and we peak at a monstrous 1908 potency. And for the Gold Trophy, we once again see Ninja, who was so far ahead in the last expansion that by changing nothing, manages to hold the position as the best non-limited job at delivering one singular big hit. Yoshioranryu's unchanged 1300 potency, boosted by 30% with Kasatsu, 10% with now Kunai's Bane, and 5% with now Dokomori, once again lands at 1952 potency, completely unchanged. Although, the competition this time is close enough that there is actually one division where Ninja falls short, which means that this time we have to bring both Ninja and Monk forward for the final damage calculation steps. First, we put together the best gear sets for these jobs to specifically produce the biggest single hit imaginable. Maximum attributes, maximum crit, maximum determination. Technically, we don't need any direct hit, as that is provided by the Dancer's Devilment, but sometimes there's no way around it. Once we have these optimal gear sets, we account for the various buff compositions, gradually building to more and more ridiculous, but possible party comps to see just how much damage we can do. For each slot, we basically grab the piece with the most crit and determination, completely ignoring any other stat, and then using materia to maximize only these two stats again. After all, we're assuming the direct hit is happening anyway, and more direct hit doesn't boost the damage. The only thing we're missing is that the final stage of relic weapons haven't released yet, but considering the lowest amount of customization relic weapons have ever offered us was 2 maxed out stats and then a third one having 2 materia worth of stats, we can assume when the relic weapons come that both crit and determination will be maxed out, leading to an extra 0.1% damage from determination. For both jobs, there's only 1 or 2 pieces where there's any thought process beyond grab piece with max 1 stat, materia max the other. For Ninja, first, the shoes offer enough flexibility due to wasting points on direct hit to choose between the 2 stats. Some number crunching suggests that double determination leads to the highest result. For the chest pieces, it really comes down to whether you want more crit or more determination. And it turns out that the max determination with crit materia solution leads to a minuscule gain over the opposite. Like, we're talking 0.0012% or so. For Monk, the only decision is on the earrings, but the earring with less direct hit, of course, wins. Starting then with Ninja, with this set, the Zivgear app potency ratio gives us an average of 7,825 damage per 100 potency. However, this does account for determination, of which we have to assume we have 0.1% extra of, so we divide that bit out, 7,825 divided by 1.131, and then multiply it by 1.132, and land on 7,831.92. Next, this number is the average result. Obviously, for the biggest hit, we have to assume this will be a high roll, since damage variance is plus minus 5%. This adds an extra 5% onto this number, meaning 8,223.5. Then we add in the crit damage bonus of 60.5%, 13,199 damage per 100 potency. Then we add in the fact it will be a direct hit for an extra 25% damage for 16,498 damage per 100 potency. Then we divide this by 100 and then multiply it by the effective Yoshioranryu potency from earlier, 1,952, landing us at an estimated direct crit of 322,041. We do the same thing for Monk, divide the 7,817 by 1.13, and then multiply by 1.131 for 7,824. Then assume it will be a high roll, 8,215.1, then multiply by the 62.6% crit damage for 13,358, then add in the direct hit for 16,697. Then we divide by 100 and multiply by the 6-sided star potency of 1,908, landing us at an estimated direct crit of 318,558. About 3,000 less than Ninja, but this then leads us to raid buffs and party compositions. For the first division, we start with a balanced dungeon party, which features a tank, an astrologian, and a dancer, aside from the job we're testing. The tank only contributes by adding to the party bonus. The astrologian will use divination, and both cards on the job being tested. Yes, they do stack. And the dancer will use standard finish and technical finish. For both jobs, this leads to a 4% party bonus, 6% from divination, 6 and 3% from the cards, and 5 and 5% from the dancer. While Devilment is also here, it doesn't do anything, we're assuming the direct crit. A 4% party bonus is worth roughly 4%. And the raid buffs stack together for a just about 27.6% damage boost, breaking the 400k barrier and landing Ninja at 427,916 damage with their Yojoranryu, with Monk following closely behind at 423,305. For the second test, we replaced the tank with a summoner for the 5% from Searing Light while preserving the party bonus, pushing Ninja to 449,312 and Monk to 444,470. An additional small push can be done by adding a Bard instead of the Summoner, which drops the party bonus to 3% but replaces the 5% boost of Searing Light with both 6% from Radiant Finale and 1% from Mage's Ballad, landing Ninja at 453,461, breaking the 450,000 barrier, with Monk closely behind at 448,681. For the second division, we use a normal 8-man comp, with 2 tanks and 2 healers, one of which will be the Astrologian. The other can be a Scholar, but it doesn't matter, the crit rate won't help. For the DPS, we bring a Dancer, Bard, and Summoner, giving us full 5% party bonus, and a combined 43.43% boost from buffs. This brings Ninja further up to 485,756, with Monk closely behind at 480,643. If we allow ourselves to drop down to single tank and single healer, we can then also fit a Red Mage and a Pictomancer for 2 more 5% buffs, boosting the combined raid buffs to 58.13% and breaking the 500,000 barrier, with Ninja landing at 535,546 and Monk at 529,909. Dropping the last tank to fit in a Monk for the Ninja's party and a Ninja for the Monk's party, we drop to 4% party bonus, but pump the raid buffs to a combined 66%, pushing Ninja up to 556,856 damage and Monk up to 550,856. But we can still push it further. For the third division, where we use a full alliance raid, we can include a Rogue on both teams, as Rogue's Mug and Ninja's Dokomori are considered separate, distinctly different debuffs and stack, adding an extra 5% to the buff stack, landing it at a combined 74.34%, and pushing Ninja up to 584,699, with Monk again closely behind at 579,399. Hypothetically, we could also have a Scholar bringing Chain Stratagem from a separate party, but it doesn't really help us. But this is where Ninja has a key weakness that Monk doesn't have. A Ninja could also provide Dokomori from a separate party, but the Ninja itself can't use this since it's already a Ninja, but the Monk can. So we replace the Ninja in the Monk party with a Reaper for that 3% Arcane Circle and put the Ninja away just like the Rogue, making the Monk raid buff stack a whopping 79.57%. Still short of an Astral Fire 3, but we're almost there. And Monk blows past Ninja with a new total of 595,751, but there's still one last thing we can do. The final cherry on top is the Gemdraught. A grade 4 Gemdraught of Strength or Dexterity will add an extra 541 Strength or Dexterity, which is equivalent to roughly an 8% damage boost. Note that the attribute boost from Gemdraughts are unaffected by the party bonus. It's just 541. This lands Monk at a final result of 643,410.6776, while Ninja finishes at a slightly lower 631,475, both breaking past the 600k barrier. And additionally, Monk beat Ninja's record from Endwalker 3 times over. But despite this, they both barely fall short of the insane over 650,000 that Blue Mage mustered without using a rogue back in Endwalker. This just really underlines why Blue Mage is a limited job, huh? So the results in summary. In a 4-man or 8-man party or any normal quote-unquote party comp, Ninja is the definite victor. But when we introduce the option of an entire alliance, being able to include specifically a ninja separate from the party gives Monk just enough of an edge to win out by being able to then also bring Reaper for a bit more raid buff. While White Mage doesn't come with the disadvantage of being one of the raid buffers itself, White Mage is such a distant third place that we'd need a whole 5% extra raid buff to even have a competition with Monk, and even more to fight Ninja on the 9-man test. Oh, and speaking of which, pre 7.2 nerf Pictomancer's 1400 potency Star Prism with a personal raid buff could have been that White Mage, and well could have beaten Monk by a fraction in the 10-player division, but this Pictomancer no longer exists. Unfortunately, Blue Mage also turned out to still be so strong that no ordinary job was able to overtake it, and with the revelation that Evercold, the next coming expansion, plans to do away with damage-increasing raid buffs, we might be losing a massive amount of potential in this silly contest of biggest single hit. But with that said, did you expect this result? And is there some other similar mathy test you'd like to see? Do let me know in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Twitch or Ko-Fi. Links in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, White Mage's Afflatus Misery is just barely less than 5% behind Monk, which means that if Arcane Circle didn't exist, then assuming gear options allow it, they don't, White Mage could have beaten Monk in the 10-player division by having a Monk instead of a Reaper in Monk's lineup. Unfortunately, Heavyweight has a lot of poor healer options for crit determination optimization, and, well, Arcane Circle does still exist.